All right, guys, welcome to solving your square root equations and equations with rational exponents. We've already kind of done these problems before in another unit, so we're going to go back and revisit these here again. Our steps we used before where we had to isolate the weird thing, in this case, the radical or the exponent with rational, with a fraction. We're going to square both sides of the equation. We're going to solve for x, and that's our steps. So here's what it looks like. The idea, anytime you start something with an equal sign in our class, that's an equation, is you want to get the weird stuff isolated. Well, the weird stuff would be the radical. That's the square root. And he is all by himself on that side, so step one is done. Once you do that, you want to do the opposite or inverse to undo it. And you guys already know this. The opposite of square roots is squaring. So you do that on both sides of the equation. Remember, the reason we do that is because square roots and squares cancel. So you get what's left inside, and over here is 5 squared. Now this is something we know how to solve. 2x plus 3. I can go and say 5 times 5 is 25. That's what 5 squared is. And then I'm just going to solve normally. I'm going to get x by himself. So I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. Divide by 2. And look at that. My answer's 11. Now I should go back and check by plugging 11 back into my equation where the x is and seeing if it works. 2 times 11 is 22, plus 3 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. It checks. This is a good answer. So what did we do? We made sure that the square root was all by itself on one side of the equal sign. Then we squared both sides, and then we solved. Let's try some more. All right, so this one I'm going to make sure the square root is by himself. He's not. There's a 3 over there. So 3, you're going to move to the other side. Five plus 3 makes 8. And then I check again. Is my square root by himself? He's isolated. So to undo a square root, the inverse is squaring. Remember, a square and a square root cancel. And you know how to do this. 8 squared is 64. And look at that, it's already got the answer. I already got x solved for. Now I should be a good person and check 64. Take the square root of that is 8. 8 minus 3 is 5. It checks. So it means 64 is a good answer. Let's try another. I want the square root all by himself. He's not. There's an x here, so bye-bye x. So I have 3 minus x equals the square root of x minus 1. All right, well, the square root is all by himself. So now I'm going to square both sides of the equation. Square root and square cancel. Yeah, now it gets nasty. So what this 3 minus x squared is really 3 minus x times 3 minus x, because that squared means twice. I'm going to multiply that out like FOIL. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times minus x is minus 3x. Minus x times 3 is minus 3x. And minus x times minus x is positive x squared. And now we've just got through doing a unit on things that have a square on them. It means you set everything on one side equal to 0. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides and subtract x from both sides. So this becomes 0 over here. Now I'm going to put it in nice order and combine all like terms. So I have an x squared. Now I'm going to count my x's. Negative 3 plus negative 3 makes negative 6x's, plus that minus x makes minus 7x's. Now to my numbers. I've got 9 and 1 make 10. And now I'm going to factor this. A times C, 1 times 10 is 10. Put B on the bottom. I'm going to multiply. What numbers multiply to give me 10, but add to give me negative 7? That's negative 5 and negative 2. Divide by A. So this becomes x minus 5, x minus 2 equals 0. And we know that what we do is we set both of those guys equal to 0 and solve for x. So I get positive 5 and positive 2 for my answers, but I got to check those. So I'm going to stick them in for this x here. 5 minus 1 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. And then plus 5. 5 plus 2 is 7, not 3. So this one is not a good answer. He didn't pass the check. We call that extraneous if he doesn't pass the check. It only happens when you have to do these FOIL kind of problems. Just letting you know. That's why we didn't have any that didn't pass before. Let's see if 2 passes. 2 minus 1 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Plus 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. That one passes the check, so my only answer is x equals 2. You won't get very many extraneous questions. They only occur when you're doing this part where you had to do the FOIL and you ended up factoring. The last 2 problems we didn't have to do that. That's why you didn't see any of them. All right, now let's look at some of our rational exponent equations. These are related. Same kind of steps. You're going to get your weird thing all by itself. Well, there's a 3 over here, so he's not isolated. So what you do to one side, you do to the other. So now I have x plus 1 to the 3/5 power equals 8. This 24 divided by 3 is 8. Now, instead of squaring both sides on this, we're going to do the inverse. And if you remember, that just means you flip that fraction over. So 3/5 flips over and becomes 5/3. And remember, we do that because the 3/5 and 5/3 cancel. This gives you x plus 1 equals 8 to the 5/3 power. And then you go over to your friendly calculator. You can use Desmos or any calculator. You can do 8 to the 5/3 power. And when you put that in the calculator, he is going to tell you that your answer is 32. So I get x plus 1 equals 32. Solve for x. And my answer is 31. Easy peasy. Let's try some more. Okay, we make sure our weird thing is isolated. Ooh, he is already. Now we can't square both sides because he's not a square root. So what we do is we do his inverse by flipping the exponent over. So 4/5 becomes 5/4. So we get x plus 1 equals 16 to the 5/4. Then we go to our calculator. We're going to type 16 to the 5/4 in the calculator. And surprisingly, it's going to tell us the answer is 32 again. But we have a little bitty problem, and I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but when we talked about this before, we said anytime this is an even number on the bottom, that you're going to actually get two answers. So you're going to get x plus 1 equals the 32 from the calculator, and x plus 1 equals negative 32. It's always positive and negative of whatever the calculator gave you. And then you're going to solve both of them. So minus 1, and I get one answer is 31, and I get one answer is negative 33. It only happens when the bottom number in your fraction there is an even number, like 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, let's try another. All right, here's our weird thing. It's not isolated. Bye-bye 3. Now it's isolated. Remember, we can't square root here, but we can flip that fraction over. So 2/3. So I get 4 minus x equals 8 to the 2/3. I go to my friend the calculator. I put 8 to the 2/3 in. And when it gives me an answer, it says that it's 4. And since this number down here is odd, not even, I only get one answer. So 4 minus x equals 4 from the calculator. And now I'm just going to solve like I normally would. And get x by himself, so bye-bye 4. And then divide by that negative in front of x. So I get 0. My answer is 0. So you're going to be practicing today on a Google form. You're going to have some that were square root equations where you're going to have to isolate the square root, square both sides, solve for x. Watch out for anything that's foiling because that means you might have something extraneous. That's a fake answer. And then the other part of what you're doing today is these rational exponents. So they're the ones with fractions in their exponent. Again, you get them isolated. And then instead of squaring, you flip the fraction over on both sides, use your calculator, and then solve for x. All right.